I think in it's showing it in the session start to being recorded. So I'm not really sure يعني أنا صراحة نسيت السيتنج بس إن شاء الله يكون بيتسجل. طيب let's start. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. معاكم إسراء ملي Assistant Professor of Microbiology, Co-Coordinator for the Medical Research Block 1 and 2. إذا في صوت انقطع فجأة اكتبولي في الشات، هسيبه مفتوح على الجنب عشان أشوف. Okay. طيب this lecture about writing the introduction. المفروض by this time you have reached a completion of your data and you already started analyzing your data and you're about to write the introduction part of your manuscript. So by the end of this lecture, you're supposed to be able to prepare an introduction part by discussing the general concept of research and present your available relevant evidence. Also, you should be able to conclude the introduction section with a rationale and an aim for your proposed research. Inshallah, by the end of this lecture, it will be very clear to you how to write your introduction to make it very strong and publishable. طيب بنات أو أولاد لما أحرك السلايد يتحرك عندكم ولا بس عندي؟ Okay, yes, good. So, let's start by the anatomy of the most, if not all, research paper. The anatomy of most research paper will be as follows. It will start with an introduction, then method, result, discussion, and conclusion, regardless the specialty or the discipline. Our focus is the introduction for this lecture. Usually the introduction has 3 to 4 paragraphs that explain what's known, what's unknown, and what are you planning to do, and how are you planning to do it, or how are you planning to achieve it. So let's examine how can you do that. So depending on the type of writing you are doing, an introduction section can be modified. However, in a proposal or a research paper, an introduction does 3 things or has 3 functions. It helps the reader to understand the type of the study, so what's the study about. It helps the reader to understand what's the motivation behind this study. Also, it helps the reader to understand what the topic of the research and why the topic of the research is important. So in your introduction, make sure that you are introducing your topic very well and review the literature about your current topic and state the hypothesis or a research question. It's similar. Sometimes people write it as a hypothesis, others would write it as a research question, and then they would answer it in the results section. So how can we do that? The first step, you have to follow 3 steps actually to achieve a strong and good introduction. So the first step, you should provide a background information and you should introduce a specific topic, your specific topic that you're talking about, and explain why it's important, so it's significant. Also, you have to mention past attempts to solve the research problem. This is called literature review. You're already aware and about the process of doing literature review to answer the research questions. Also, you have to conclude your introduction section by mentioning your aim and specific objectives. Some schools say that you don't have to mention specific objectives at the end of the introduction. Only you have to mention the overall aim. Most of the time, the overall aim or the general aim of your research, it's basically your title. But make sure that you don't add extra details to your aim. So just mention the target group, such as medical intern and the location. Don't mention specific details about how you are going to conduct the study. by mentioning, for example, we are going to conduct a cross-sectional study in which we are going to distribute a questionnaire. Then the questionnaire has three parts. No, don't do that. Just mention the aim of this study to measure the prevalence, for example, of type 2 diabetes among medical intern or among college student at مثلا female campus or at the male campus at مثلا King Saud bin Abdulaziz University جدة مثلا College of Medicine. That's it. So you specific about the location, target group, your aim, and the main goal of this study, the purpose of the study. So you don't mention the methods that you are going to use, and don't mention the instrument, either a chart review, a questionnaire, an interview. No, don't do that. Okay. So the second, let's examine them one by one. These three steps. The first step, the background information. So you start with the biological or medical problem, the big picture. So what the subject or the problem is. It should be simple and clear. So you could start with a big statement such as the global burden of diabetes mellitus مثلا around the world is such and such, or the global burden of HIV is that. So it will grab the audience attention, and you will support it by bring some statistics to show how it's important and how it's serious to discuss that topic. Also, you have to do a generalized literature review. You go from the broad spectrum, then gradually to be specific. So overall, you talk about, let's say, HIV as a global issue. Then you move to exact issue about the virus method distribution, or antiviral medication, or treatment plan, and etc. So moving toward presenting the specific topic of your research from the big picture. So from literature review, from broad, go to specific area within the broad field. Uh, this is not a place to summarize everything. I know sometimes you write or you read a lot of information about your topic, but is not really a good place to summarize everything. You could save them for your discussion later. If you find really interesting points that you want to mention it in your paper, keep it as a supporting point when you discuss and analyze your result. You can draw some information from them in your discussion. Also, you have to mention something about the significance of your research. So while the subject is very important, you should mention some statistic about death or about affected group or and etc. Also, you have to highlight possible benefit from solving this issue. So you could say that finding مثلا the mechanism of action of this treatment enable us to find a treatment option maybe, or antiviral option that will block مثلا, if we understand the mechanism of this receptor function, maybe we could find a treatment option that will be utilized to block the receptor from binding, let's say. So, and etc. So you have to be, as we said, you move from the big global or medical problem, then you go specific to one area, then after that move toward mentioning the significance of that, how that's going to benefit the medical field, how that's going to benefit the global population. The second step in writing the introduction, um, you should discuss the every past attempt to solve the research problem. When I say every past attempt, I don't really mean it. يعني I don't mean to go and gather everything that have been mentioned in the literature about this issue. No, you just most of the time you will find 2-3 research will talk about the same concept, have done the same process. Maybe 3 research or 4 research have examined the role of this receptor on macrophage, other in dendritic cells, and other in other type of cells. So just summarize them and pick one or two of them and mention it. You have to indicate that يعني, this field of research is not new. يعني, it has been investigated or examined or studies by مثلا Khalid et al. Or it has been investigated by Muhammad et al. And you have to clarify how it's different from your attempt. So whenever you mention like, okay, those group have done this work, but we are doing another work, you have to link them in one sentence. I will show you at the end of this presentation how to make the statement when you link what has been previously documented to your aim. And you have to focus on the differences. Sometimes the difference is simple and small, such as you could find a study that's similar to your study, with only difference is the target group. Let's say you are doing your study on female population and they're doing it on male population, and vice versa. Another simple difference you can find, while sometimes they will do it in pediatric and you do it in adult. So the target group or population. Sometimes very good and strong studies been done, but very limited sample size due to مثلا ethical issue or social issues or culture مثلا. بعدين مثلا you find in different city that more people more يعني open or welcome to accept such مثلا interview or to answer to the survey. So it's good that you would replicate the same study but with different population or different geographical location. أحيانا كثير طلبة يرسلوا a topic or proposal for revision and they find duplication, so similar study has been conducted maybe in Riyadh in another city. So the solution for that, you modify your objectives in a way that you make it a bit different from that study. So we usually what we do, we request the objectives of that study and we examine them. So let's say they are doing it in adult, we do it in pediatric, or if they have done the same research on let's say they include male and female, so we look for different class, let's say college student or school student, and etc. Sometimes the differences is quite advanced when you have different methodology. When you use let's say randomized clinical trial or cross-sectional study to examine something. So let's say another group or another study has conducted similar study, but they conduct an interview, maybe one-to-one interview, but you are planning to do it using cross-sectional survey or questionnaire. So it's quite different. You have to report any differences and which might strengthen your study to make it more interesting to the audience. طيب, so while you are examining similar studies, so the first step you will be doing is to search the literature for similar studies or similar work to yours. Whenever you find one, start to examine it to find if there is similarities and differences and how it's relevant to your study. And important to read their discussion to see if they agree with your same conclusion, or sometimes you will find that they have some gaps in the knowledge that you can examine instead of repeat the same work. Sometimes you disagree with them or you agree with them. That's really good in the discussion section, so you can elaborate more and you can mention مثلا Khalid et al. Document or report there is the prevalence of مثلا HIV among college students is مثلا 0.5. However, we report different percentage or different prevalence, and that could be يعني you can explain it in the discussion, of course, not here in the introduction. You can say that it might be because we are living in two different geographical area, let's say. Maybe our percentage is lower than their percentage because maybe there is an advocate awareness campaign about the disease and etc. So look for the differences and similarities and the gaps. In the last part of the introduction, usually it's about your aim. So you have to conclude your introduction by mentioning what you are planning to do and to achieve, and your research aim or questions. So basically, you have to say that this study aimed to investigate or study or measure. Make sure that you're using strong action verbs such as investigate, study, measure, design, analyze, develop, and avoid very overwhelming and broad common verbs such as discuss, explore, examine, find out, look. Those are not really strong action verb, and they're it's very useful to avoid using them. Um, so while you are trying to write your introduction is as we illustrate, it's very sometimes very tricky to write a good introduction, but keep in your mind that a good introduction can give a strong start for your paper, because most of the time readers would read the abstract and sometimes they go further to read the introduction if they feel that it's something that really interesting, so they can carry on. So sometimes some school and some authors usually prefer to write the introduction of the manuscript at the end of their drafting process, because so what they feel like once they know what they have done and accomplished in their article or research, so they know how to structure their introduction and how to summarize it and how to put it in very nice way. And sometimes also they do this process, they do it at the end because they want to make sure that they don't miss any part of their conclusion or the final outcome. However, these three tips could help you to write a strong introduction. The first one, set a context. The second one, use the right tone and tense. And the third one, to be organized. We will see some examples how you can apply that. So usually, as a general rule, when writing in academic paper, you should follow the accepted grammar and life and style, conversations of writing. You're not supposed to use something unusual. You should follow the academic writing style. You have to link your current situation with the one you are planning to do or to achieve or to change or to study. You could use some phrases or some words such as but, however, unfortunately. For example, you can say that many research has examined receptor X as a factor or associated of receptor X association with receptor Y, for example, مثلا in the viral entry. However, very مثلا the mechanism of receptor X مثلا facilitating the virus entry is still unknown or yet to be found or yet to be determined. Therefore, this research aim to examine مثلا or to investigate the role of receptor X on the viral entry. So you link what have been found or done by many researchers. So many researchers has examined this receptor role in the viral entry. However, still there is the gap, which is the mechanism of this receptor is not really, the mechanism of function is still missing. Therefore, your research is focused about finding out or investigate the role or the mechanism of factor or receptor X role in the viral entry, and so on. So also, it's very encouraged and highly encouraged to use phrases to anchor the context of your sentence over time. You should use phrases such as recently or during the last 10 years or since the discovery. Those can help you to link your sentences, and it's help you to make the structures of your introduction more coherent. Also, it's highly encouraged to place your work within given research field. Sometimes it's confusing when you are talking about a specific field, let's say medical education or biomedical science, where there is similarity between that field and any other field like مثلا electrical engineering. When you're talking about a specific polymer or compound, you have to be specific. مثلا إنه that polymer or that compound was found, or the only compound was found in that field, مثلا in the field of biomedical field. Okay. Okay. So the second step is to use the right tone and tense. The right tone, usually in the academic writing, you have to be formal and to use impersonal tone. What impersonal tone means, you don't have to refer yourself as a performer of the action. We know that you have done this work with your team or colleagues, but avoid using our study. Instead, use this study. Also, avoid using we measure the level of مثلا the protein. Instead, use the level of the protein was measured by the research team or by the scientists or by etc. Always, it's better to use an active voice instead of the passive voice. But if you feel you don't have really a clear active person to refer to, you can use the passive voice. Also, avoid using I will show you in this مثلا paper or on this research. Instead, just say this report will show, or this study will illustrate, or this figure will explain, and so on. So that will give if you use these terms instead and the voices, it will help your paper to be more professional instead of using I and we and our. Second, in terms of the right tense, um, usually a lot of researchers and writers get caught thinking about which is the right voice that they can use in their paper. In general, you can use present tense, simple past tense, and present perfect tense. This is the three most common voice can be used in your paper. It's not true that you have to mention and report everything in the past tense. No, you can use the present tense with general facts, such as here we have an example. You can say HIV infects immune system cells which have a CD4 plus receptor on the surface. So this is a general fact. It's impossible to use the passive voice with it. Or it's you cannot use the past tense with it, so it has to be present. Also, when you are trying to indicate or to bring some meaning or explanation of a previous sentence, you can say if the viral load measurement is high, it generally indicates the HIV is present and replicating. So this is an example of and implications or meaning. Also, you can use the present tense when you are about to talk about future researches, such as further studies about the role of G protein coupled chemokines receptor during HIV infection are needed. It's true, this is a passive voice and it's not recommended, but it's fine to use it because you are talking general. If there is a reported study has been done, let's say by Ahmad or Muhammad or Maram, talking about that, you can mention مثلا Maram et al. Has reported the role of G protein coupled chemokine receptor during HIV infection. However, further studies has to be done to find out the mechanism of G protein coupled chemokine receptor function مثلا. بس passive voice here is acceptable. Okay. Uh, طيب ما بتتحرك عند السلايدات، عندك بتتحرك. Okay. In terms of the past tense, the simple past tense, you can use it in events that has already been completed in this study, يعني your study. So whatever you have accomplished or complete, you can mention it in the past tense. For example, you can say in this study, Escherichia coli was utilized as a representative indicator of antimicrobial resistance of gram-negative bacteria. This was a passive voice, okay, but this study has been done by you, so it's totally fine. So you report something interesting during your study, and you want to report it, so everyone know who report that, because that has been done and completed by you. Also, in general, discrete events occur in an identified time and place. For example, during sensitivity testing, a new strain of E. coli reported resistant to the same class of antibiotic. You can use it here as well. Okay. طيب. Present perfect tense, it can be also used in your introduction in two events. The first one, events that occur in an identified time or place. You can say many researchers or many researchers have focused on the regulation of chemokine receptor CCR5. This chemokine receptor used in the HIV study. Okay, you can use also in events that have recently been completed or ongoing still, يعني to be yet to be completed. You can say until recently, researchers in our university have analyzed their research data using SPSS software. So you can use simple past. You can use present perfect tense, and you can use present tense. Okay. لحظة الشاشة كبرت. Sorry, I have an issue and I think let's see. كيف أصغرها. Okay, I think it's fine now. طيب. We're done with this. Okay. The third tip, to be organized. Usually the introduction, it should be 3 to 4 paragraphs, but you can extend it to 5 paragraphs, يعني 3 to 4 original or long paragraphs, and the fifth paragraph talk about the aim and the aim of this research and the method, how to achieve it. Usually, the first paragraph focus on your opening sentence and a general broad picture. The second one focus on the literature review about your specific area of research. And the third one focus on the summary of the statement of hypothesis. You can add additional fourth paragraph between the second and third to extend your and elaborate more, talking about your current area of research and what the limited area and the gaps in the knowledge. And you can finish by the paragraph number 4 about the hypothesis and future and your plan, what you are planning to do. مثلا this research or this study aims to measure the prevalence among مثلا college student at this city between the period of كده and كده. تمام. طيب you have to arrange your idea logically and chronologically. يعني use the common sense knowledge when you are illustrating your literature review. It has to be in chronological order. So you have to start with 1997, let's say, if you have one article or reference from there, then follow by 2003, 2015, 19, and 21. Don't يعني start with the recent one, but then go back in order. It's better to start chronologically, mentioning that what has been done, what is known, until you reach the point. يعني there is still gaps in the knowledge. يعني until مثلا 220 مثلا another research documented this or report this. However, there is still gap in the knowledge because we still the researcher, they don't know the mechanism of مثلا factor 5 function. طيب avoid the abbreviation, or at least explain them. يعني as much as you can when you mention you know, all of you, that in the abstract you don't يعني list the abbreviation. You just have to use an abbreviated word, but here in the introduction you can use the word, introduce it for the first time, but in the same time you have to show the abbreviation between the parentheses. طيب also you have to focus on the reference list. Sometimes from the reference while you're doing the literature you find additional papers that are interesting for you, then you go and you read them. So it's very crucial to keep your reference list. Therefore, avoid, and I'm saying really avoid, it should be really prohibited to cut and paste information from another يعني source, because أول شيء it's not professional. تاني شيء it's not gonna help you or them. It's not fair for يعني the other writer not to give him credit. So you should paraphrase whatever you like from their paper. I have a very useful technique that I use to paraphrase I do يعني create a table and then I insert the original text. Let's say I like 2 or 3 sentences from a paper talking about this disease or this virus or this infection. So I insert the original one and I mark that column as the original. Then I add another column mentioning the reference or the source of that يعني text, because over time you don't really remember where did you get this text from. So it's important I just paste the original information and I paste the source. Uh, After that, whenever I get back to the يعني Excel sheet or to the Word document, I get back to the table. Not necessarily at the same time you have to do the paraphrasing, no. And I read it for first time. Then I start to type with my understanding. So, and I highlight this column as paraphrasing 1. So this is the first attempt. And I add another 2 columns for paraphrasing 2 and 3. So the second time I get back to the original text and I look at it, and then I start to compare it with what I wrote. Most of the time it will be different. It's the same concept or the same idea, but it's quite different. If it's not quite different and still looks similar, I do the second attempt of paraphrasing and I insert it in column 2, like paraphrasing 2. And I keep doing the same for all the document. يعني. Whenever I read something, I just paste it as it is, and then I immediately insert the source in different cell, and I start doing the paraphrasing over time. By the end of يعني time that I have to finish the paper, I find that I have 3 versions. I can combine them. يعني paraphrasing 1 and 2 and 3, I can combine them to make very long paragraph that's about small idea, but it's really effective. Or I can summarize them in one final version. Okay, you can do that. Always include local studies. Many studies that يعني or papers from the student sometimes when we do the review we see يعني they do really great job looking at the global issue and examine it and then mention at the international level. I'm sorry. But that's not really helpful when you are doing some research here in the kingdom. you have to mention national research. A lot of universities, Taiba University, King Abdulaziz University, medical students around the kingdom, they're doing a lot of research. So it's really useful to find source of information about similar study has been done around the kingdom. Don't يعني feel يعني a bit intimidated by the fact that it has been done. It's always good to compare between your outcome and their outcome. If it's same outcome, it's also good. You can that will confirm your results. Like a similar study has been done by this group, and they found this. So you will discuss that in and elaborate more in the discussion section. Okay. طيب, it's ideal to use it's better to use at least 10 references, but if you cannot, most of the reference used in the introduction section, because يعني methodology and result well discussion most of the time it has the least number of references. Ideal to increase the number of references to make it between 12 to 15. And that said, we're done. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer. Okay, so Basim asked about the passive voice. Can make the research confusing. Isn't better to use the active voice without mentioning we, our, and other informal words? I agree with you, Bassam. Okay, I agree with you, Bassam. Passive voice make the sentence weak, but if you have the person who have done the work, you know his information, you know the research paper, it's always encouraged to mention him and to report that and to do proper citation. That will make the research very strong. So you can mention Khalid et al. In a similar study has مثلا evaluate or measure the prevalence of type 2 diabetes among مثلا school kids between مثلا age of 8 and 12 مثلا وتذكر الاريا مثلا in جدة ولا in طائف ولا the city. Always it's very encouraged to use an active, but if you couldn't find who has done the work, or you want to combine that several research has been done مثلا to evaluate the prevalence of مثلا hepatitis C. However, هذا ممكن الactive passive voice you use it in the last statement when you are about to introduce your aim. So you already mentioned like 3, 4, 5 studies have done that, and now you want to summarize all those studies. You don't want to refer to one particular person. That's why I use passive voice. Abdulaziz, in total, how many words does the introduction include? I don't really have a word count, but I can say that it could be 1.5 يعني page. That would be enough for the introduction. تقريبا يعني صفحة ونص. 3 paragraphs. If you are using 3 paragraphs صفحة ونص. 4 paragraphs ممكن صفحتين. بس that would be enough. في أحد تاني عنده أسئلة ثانية؟ Can you find the lecture in the learning material under learning material? Okay, if anything is not clear for you, here is my contact information, my KSAU email and NGHA email. You can reach out to me anytime, okay? Thank you.